Welcome back to the Volunteer Roadmap. My name's Arch Trimble, and today we went to Nashville, Tennessee, our state capital, to talk to a very close friend and a mentor of mine, Dr. Alfred Degrafinreid II, the CEO of Leadership Tennessee. Alfred's been in this position for a couple of years, and I was fortunate enough to get to go through Leadership Tennessee NXT a few years ago, Class 7, greatest class ever. What Alfred does is put together the brightest minds in the state, not just for the sake of saying, hey, we're all here for leadership. If you get into Leadership Tennessee, you are already a leader. We put these folks together to try and solve the hard problems that are going to face our state, because guess what? Everybody is comfortable with talking to people that look like them and have the same background. But if that's all you're comfortable with, we're never going to succeed. Finding a way to solve problems with people that don't look like you and have different backgrounds is really what makes the difference. That's why Leadership Tennessee is so important. Is the more I go across this state of 7.2 million people, the more I realize that it's a small circle that actually make decisions. A lot of these people have been fortunate enough to go through this program. So we're here today to learn why. Today, I am here in Nashville at Switchyards in Germantown with a good friend of mine, Alfred Degrafinreid, Dr. Alfred Degrafinreid, who runs what I believe to be the best leadership program, not just in the state of Tennessee, but in America. I, in full disclosure, am a former participant of Class 7 of Leadership Tennessee Next, the greatest class ever. But I wanted to come up and talk to Alfred because he and I share a lot of views about what is going on in our state, what the leadership for the next generation needs to do, and how we get there. So without further ado, let me introduce my friend, Dr. Alfred Degrafinreid.
Well, Arch, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy that you've arched around town and ended up in Germantown in Nashville, Tennessee. Always good to see you, brother.
Yeah, thanks. Alfred and I were talking this past week, and he was going to do something else. I brought my kids up here. I love Nashville, as everybody knows. And as we've traveled across the state, we tried not to repeat too many towns so far. But I wanted to make sure that while we were talking to municipalities, while we were talking to counties, and while we were talking to small businesses, we talked to somebody that I believe has a hand in making our state better for the next generation. The greatest thing that I learned about Leadership Tennessee, or learned from Leadership Tennessee, is how to solve hard problems with people with diverse backgrounds. It's something that I think has served me well. I know that it has served members of my class well. But I want to get into that a little bit further. But first, I want to take a few minutes to talk to you about how you got to be the CEO of Leadership Tennessee. Give me some background on Dr. Alfred Degrafinreid.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you again for having me here. So I'm originally from Memphis, as you know, and I moved here to Nashville to go to college at the Tennessee State University.
Yes.
And somehow or another, I got involved in politics. I was on student government, and there was a big U.S. Senate race happening when I was in college. So I plugged in. And when you bounce around local, state, federal government, sometimes you have an opportunity to get, experiences that you wouldn't have. I have a former mentor and boss of mine who shared something with me. He said, Alfred, you won't be able to know what you're going to be doing in life. He said, you have the kind of background that you can do just about anything. So don't think that you're going to know what you're doing when you're 40. And he was absolutely right. I'm over 40 now, and I had no clue that I'd be doing this very important work to improve the state of Tennessee. A lot of times people think that only elected officials have the wherewithal to make the state better. But in fact, there are other organizations and people who are doing good work that move the needle ahead for the state.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Leadership Tennessee, they have done a tremendous job of pulling in people from all different backgrounds and from all different industries, elected officials, nonprofit, for-profit people, putting them in the same room because they believe collaborative effort is going to get problems solved. Now, Alfred mentioned his background a little bit on the political side, same as mine. And I think that's why Alfred and I are such good friends, is that in our partisan warlord days, as we say, benevolent, of course, we saw a lot of good things happen, but we also saw some things that I don't think either of us really cared so much for. So the attitude is, why are we running from the edges even further? Instead of taking two really competent people or two really competent organizations that may have diverging points of view, but you're working to the center, right? We're trying to fix problems. Sure, you'd love to fix them for everybody, but fix them for the majority of folks, right? Like, how do you come together to make this state a better place? Now, Leadership Tennessee is a nonprofit. but it's also a business, right?
Absolutely.
We've talked a lot about how you run nonprofits in the past, but Alfred understands that nonprofits are only successful if they have the funds to propagate what they're talking about. So how do you run Leadership Tennessee? Tell me where you get your funds from. Tell me some of the things you're looking for.
Gotcha. Well, so basically we have a board that's comprised of like 12 members, top leaders from across the state, all of whom have gone through Leadership Tennessee. And they set the tone and the guidance for like what the brand is, right? I was hired as president and CEO in 2022 after a very successful founding executive director and later president of Leadership Tennessee. And we already had good footing and good foundation on like how you raise money, good relationships. The brand was already set up. So I didn't create that. I'm a graduate of the best class of Leadership Tennessee as well. That happens to be class 7
Yep.
of the signature program. But what I want to point out is that once I started, COVID had already, reared its ugly head. So some of the funding that we had before had disappeared. And it wasn't, I didn't take that as we don't like this new guy. It just happened that sometimes priorities change.
That's right.
But what I think happened was quickly people realized, even though COVID was here, we need to make sure that our leaders were able to see things across the state. Like people will always cut down on those budgets that are for professional development. But what I've noticed over the last 3.5, almost 4 years, is that they've doubled down and make sure that people go through, particularly from the LT Next standpoint, because like our organization, we have 3 verticals when it comes to fundraising. We have corporate giving. Mm-hmm. So I meet with a lot of corporate leaders across the state, and I have to share the proposition value of the organization. A lot of people have gone through the program. We do not pay to play. So that means that you can't just write a check and think that we're going to give you a slot to get in like some other leadership programs do across the nation. But that's one part of it. We also have membership dues, where we have people who are life members, annual dues paying members. And then also we have, those are the 2 ways that we get funding coming in that way, the corporate and piece. And we also have people like grant funding as well. We don't get a lot of that. Kind of my thought process is if we receive grant funding from, let's say, from the state, then maybe the state dictates what we can and can't talk about. So we've stayed away from that. But we do have there's a movement afoot to partner with another statewide leadership program and do some joint work together and go after some national grant funds so that we can run programs that are very similar and then have some cross collaboration amongst the 2 states. And I can't tell you which state, but I can tell you it's one of the states that's contiguous to Tennessee.
Okay.
So it touches Tennessee, and hopefully we'll be able to announce something here shortly.
Now, and I'm probably forgetting one, but we've mentioned 7 twice, and I think there's 7 states that border Tennessee. So I got, decent odds of getting it right. Now, you came in 2022 after a successful career, but why don't you tell everybody how Leadership Tennessee started before you get here? What was the original funding source? What was the mission?
Well, so that's a great question. So what's interesting about this role is that when Leadership Tennessee was founded, I was serving as legal counsel to Congressman Cooper. And I remember the announcement like it was yesterday. He was in D.C., as you all know, or maybe a lot of people know, when you're a member of Congress, a lot of times you will fly out on Monday.
That's right.
And then you'll come back on Thursday
night, yeah.
So I think it was a Tuesday or Wednesday when they made the announcement. And he asked me, can you go to this thing? I want to know what it's about. So I pulled up to Lipscomb University, and I'd never forget Tom Ingram was one of our founders of Leadership Tennessee. He was on the stage along with Linda Peak Shack, who was another founder of Leadership Tennessee. And at the time, Randy Lowry was the president of Lipscomb, so he was there as well. And they did kind of a mock session on a topic because I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Leadership Nashville. I'm actually going through the 49th class right now.
Okay.
Leadership Nashville is one of the oldest leadership programs in the nation. And I'll talk about something that Governor and former Senator, former Secretary of Education, Lamar Alexander.
My hero, by the way.
One of my heroes, too. One of my heroes, too. He mentioned something at Closing Retreat. I'll touch on that later. But his wife, Honey Alexander, was one of the founders of Leadership Nashville. So the interesting part about it is when it started, a lot of the Leadership Tennessee people talk to other programs to see what works. Like I tell people a lot, we're not Leadership Nashville, we're not Leadership Chattanooga or Memphis or Knoxville or Kingsport, right? We're different. We travel across the state.
That's right.
And we have, I describe the work that we do as putting on many conferences that are 24 hours long throughout the state. So you get an immersive experience. We'll drop you into a new city that maybe you've been to before, but you're going to really get to look under the hood and then see what's going on and learn about like what makes things work, what doesn't work. And then if you have an issue, invariably what happens is Arch will come in and say, hey, I have this issue that's going on in Chattanooga. Then somebody from another part of the state, maybe Memphis, my hometown, says, we had the same issue 10 years ago and we solved it. Then naturally Arch will say, well, how'd you solve it? Mm-hmm. And then there's a connection. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican. It doesn't matter if you're rural or urban. What matters is you had a problem that you need to get fixed. Somebody's already solved that problem, and now you're sharing information. And without Leadership Tennessee, you would not be in the same room with that person.
No, and that's why I love LT so much. And I shorten it because Leadership Tennessee takes up too many seconds in our podcast, right? But I personally have had this belief for a long time, and Alfred and I have talked about it. Tennessee is the greatest state ever, right?
Absolutely.
It truly is. We've got 4 large urban areas, and now I'm going to knock on Chattanooga because we fell behind Clarksville. We got 5 large urban areas, right? So demographics in our state are changing. Folks are moving here because it's such a great place to live and a great place to do business. I have believed firmly that as our demographics have changed, and at least this is my hope, that maybe you get folks in the next generation, folks your and I age, maybe a little bit younger in their early 20s that are willing to be more of single issue voters, not from a we don't like Republicans or Democrats, but from a, you know what, it's just time to pull up our bootstraps and get problems fixed in this state. I think for a long, long time, our state has always done the best of its abilities, and I think it will continue going forward. But I also want to see us continue to work on the hard problems, right? I don't ever want to see culture wars, but I want to preserve our status as a low tax, pro-business state. And I think that's something that Leadership Tennessee does so well. So you tell me, as we move forward in this state, do you believe that Leadership Tennessee can play a significant role in helping solve some of these problems?
I would say absolutely, because if you look at our roster, like I like to call it, we have 850 members who graduated from the Signature and LT Next program since 2013. Mm-hmm. And eventually LT Next is going to eclipse the amount of people who finish the Signature program, because we run 2 programs a year, and it's usually 30 to 32 people in the LT Next. And we have maybe about 45 to 50 who do the Signature program. So we're getting very close to it. So our members are in the room. They're already making decisions. Like one of my favorite examples, and I won't call people out by name, but a couple of years ago, we had 2 state senators go through, and that was the first time we had 2 members of the Senate from opposite parties go through a program together. They knew each other, they served together, but once they graduated, they were like, wow, I didn't know this much about you. I mean, it was like building a relationship inside of the Senate that you didn't have before with someone who's on the opposite side. That doesn't mean they always have to vote together.
No.
But what happens is now I know this person and I want to talk more often. And that happens so much across the state. I love to see when organic relationships, we just say, let's forget about the partisanship. You know, like I worked at the legislature when I was right out of college. Even though I worked for the majority party at the time, I made friends on the other side of the aisle. I really didn't care what party you represented. All I cared about is, are you willing to do the work for the people?
Yeah.
And that's so simple. Like if I, like, this is a bad example because I know how to change a tire, and I worked on cars growing up. So like if I didn't know how to change a tire and I'm on the side of the road and I have to be somewhere, and someone who's driving down the street who's from a different party knows how to change a tire, I don't want them to say, I'm not going to help that person because they're in a different party.
That's right.
You know, like you should just be able to say, I know this person, I trust them, let's make something happen.
Yeah.
So like that's one example. I mean, it's not apropos to me because I know how to change tires. I would not be on here. I know how to change oil. I know how to do a lot of things. I can't do brakes.
No,
but
stay tuned for the next segment where Alfred changes the tire on the volunteer roadmap.
I know it.
But I think I think that's why I love it so much. Is we talked about before the podcast came on. I am a former Republican Party chair. Most of my friends think I am a Democrat. You are a former Democrat official, operator, whatever, just a good guy. A lot of your friends think you're a Republican, but we share a common ground in our belief that Tennessee should be a low tax, pro business state, right? Fiscal notes are fiscal notes.
Right.
And we mentioned while Alfred runs a nonprofit, the nonprofit doesn't do any good unless you got any money in the tank, right?
Right.
So I'll say this, and I will drop a name because Leadership Tennessee helped me in a lot of ways. I firmly believe that it changed my life. I don't think I'm the only person, but when I went through, I was in a career that I used to enjoy, didn't enjoy so much anymore. But LT took me around the state, and it allowed me to meet people that I didn't know. And it showed me that my version of what I thought Tennessee was and what it could be was 10% of where it was. We then went up to Kingsport for Leadership Tennessee next session, and I'll dime this man out, Dr. David Golden from ETSU. And I'm sitting there, and I can't remember what I had at work when I came back the next week in insurance. I'm just dreading it, right? Like, because I'm up here with people that are trying to solve state problems. I'm like, this is awesome. And this man stands up in Johnson City, right? And he looks at me and he goes, I can tell that you long range plan for your business, but you've never long range planned for your own life. And
Wow.
it hit me in the solar plexus,
Yes.
right? Like, had no idea. Fast forward 3 years later, I gave up a career in insurance. I took 6 months traveling around the state with my children, seeing all 95 counties, learning that everybody in the state wants the same thing, that it's based on a couple of different things. And it sent me in to what I would love to call, painters always have their different eras, right? Like to call it my nonpartisan era, where I just kind of gave up all of that rhetoric, right? I firmly believe that this state is the greatest place in the world, but I get concerned because Alfred's got young children. I've got young children too. And neither of us want to have seen Tennessee at its peak. But he and I both grew up at a time when there wasn't a Republican supermajority in the state and that there had to be some bipartisanship. You know Governor Phil Bredesen, one of the best guys of all time. I think Governor Bill Haslam, one of the greatest guys of all time. When you had folks like that running for office, you knew no matter what, that whichever one came out on top, they were going to be a great leader for as many Tennesseans as possible. And yeah, they're partisan, but they're partisan in their belief to work towards a solution, right? They're not partisan in some of the issues that you and I have talked about today, and some of the issues that we have. It's no longer that I don't agree with your policy. I think you're not a good person because I don't agree with you. How do we unwind some of that? What does Leadership Tennessee teach us with the different folks in the room? How can we calm that rhetoric down?
Well, I think what happens is, first, Leadership Tennessee is known to strip titles at the door.
That's right.
Just because you're a state senator or a state representative or a healthcare executive, once you get in the room with everybody else, we do kind of pre-facilitation at open and retreat. And we let the class decide how they want to present and talk to one another. Mm-hmm. And I always ask them, okay, so-and-so, Arch, you're a doctor. So do you want your classmates to call you a doctor? And they're like, no, we don't want to do that. We need to be on first name basis. Perfect. That's exactly what I was hoping that you would say. And oftentimes I don't have to say, like, are you a doctor or not? Because people will say that. Then also, like, just being honest and open and saying what's on your mind. Like, this world that we live in which that social media, people are looking for clicks and reposts, and the nastier you are, the more likes you get. The more
views you get.
That's not really what we want. And I also feel like what happens in Leadership Tennessee and other leadership programs is that people will present their representatives at first.
Yes.
So when they first get to open and retreat in the first few sessions, they're not really themselves. But then halfway through the program, we embed some things that makes people really want to say, okay, this is how I feel about this subject. And we're friends now. We've spent the last couple months together. We talk, we text, we communicate in the group chat. We know each other now. Now I feel like I'm okay to tell Arch, this is how I feel about this issue. And I think that helps because there's no other time that you can get into a room with people that you disagree with and then it be collegial.
That's right.
And people are they're paying money to go through the program. They're representing their company, their industry.
There's some skin in the game,
They have some
right?
skin in the game. So you really don't want to be that person who's like, oh, they were just horrible. Now you have 45 other people across the state that think that you're not a cool person, or I would never do business with this person, or I never support that person. So I think over time, what happens, Arch, is that people aren't being as honest with others as they should be. And I think that's just a sign of the times right now. I think that there are some things going on nationally that makes it so that people can just say what they want to say, and it doesn't seem like there are repercussions. And I don't retreat to my corner and point and say, I don't like you. I'm very direct. If I don't like you, I'm like, I may not say, hey, Arch, I don't like you. I'm gonna say, hey, I disagree with what you said, and this is why. And see, I want people to treat me like that. I have never been a person who only wants to hang around people who think like I do. My parents always said, you need to be around people who are smarter than you, because if you're the smartest person in the room, you're not in the right room.
I've always believed if you want to get better at something, you have to find somebody that's better than you at it.
Right.
A lot of times it's hard to swallow that kind of pride.
Think about sports.
That's right.
Yeah.
Like I had a basketball goal growing up, and I practiced all the time. I got cut in 8th grade. Apparently that wasn't my thing. So if I wanted to do better, guess what? I had to learn from some kids that were better than me.
Right.
And I started playing with them, and it made me better. Same thing where I played golf in high school. I know I look like a country club Republican, duly noted, right? But I played with some guys that played up here at Vanderbilt and were tour pros, and I never had a chance to get better by being the best person in that room, right? You always have to find somebody that's willing to dust your behind, right? And I think that is what Leadership Tennessee does well.
Can I add one thing?
Please.
Like, I think that, like, I love Tennessee. There are a bunch of brilliant people here. So the odds are, if you get into one of our programs, like, you're pretty impressive
Already.
Like, you're already a leader.
You said that.
Yeah.
Just getting in here doesn't make you a leader.
Right.
You weren't getting in here unless you already were one.
Right.
Yeah.
So then what happens is when you go around the room and people like kind of recap, or they explain something, or this thing made me feel this way, I think people will say, wow, I like that person. I want to get to know him. And like, everybody's not built like that. But if I take copious notes, like if somebody says something, I'm going to take notes on it and say, I really like how they said that. Not that I want to reuse it and repurpose it, but I want to send a note to them or talk to them and say, I like how you said that. Or that is so interesting. I never thought of it from that perspective. And I think I disagree with it, but help me understand how you got to that point.
That's right.
And see, like, I feel like the coach in me says that you don't get better at anything without sacrifice and discomfort. If you're not uncomfortable, and I tell my 10-year-old son this a lot, I said, son, you don't get anywhere without being uncomfortable. Like, that's how you get better. It's just like with the basketball analogy you use, right? You were uncomfortable when you got cut, but then uncomfortable playing golf with people who are much better than you. But guess what? Because of that discomfort, you decide that you want to keep on moving forward so you can improve. And that's the same thing we feel about these leadership programs. It's the same thing we feel about how we want to move the state forward. Like I always say, no one gets into Leadership Tennessee if they don't want to see Tennessee be better.
That's right.
Like that's a precursor. Like, you have to care about the state. You have to care about moving the state forward, moving the needle forward. If you don't do that, then you're not a right candidate. And that's why I tell everybody, and you know this, I stand up and say on first day, how many of you are Rotarians?
That's right.
And I always say that. I say, because I'm a former Rotary president of Nashville Club, one of the largest in the world. I think that leadership programs benefit from having Rotarians in them.
100%. We've talked about Rotary. Alfred has been kind enough to come down to Chattanooga Rotary and speak to us. And man, I don't think there had been a room with more Leadership Tennessee people in it than that day. But what I love what you did, and my first session was at Paris Landing State Park, and I had been there with my family on the way to Reelfoot Lake to shoot ducks when I was a kid. You know, there wasn't anything out there, right? Like,
right.
You got air in Tennessee, and then you got the Danville grain elevator out in the middle of Kentucky. Like, that is it. And we sit in there and I'm driving, it's like 4 hours from Chattanooga, right? And I come up here, it's hot. I think it's August. And I'm like, man, why did I come up here? This thing's costing me money. And I go and sit down in this beautiful state park lodge that Governor Lee, who's an amazing Tennessean, that was one of his big priorities, right? And one of the first things you said was that you are already a leader if you are here. And what it did for me, and what I think it did for everybody else in the class, is everybody walks in with preconceived notions, right? Like, I am more important in my town than anybody else. It set everybody on a level footing with cold ice, right? Like, you may think you're special, but you're more special than anybody in this place. By the end of that night, I had had a couple of really deep conversations with people that I consider wonderful friends, including a guy that works for the Memphis Grizzly organization out in Memphis, about how his background came and some paths that he took when some of his friends went one way and he went the other, and how he believes, just like you and I do, that Memphis really is the greatest city. It's hands down.
I mean, Memphis is just a great city.
Look, I know you love Memphis because you're a native.
Yeah.
I love Memphis because I'm an East Tennessean, right? I've spent my life in Chattanooga. I spent my life in Knoxville, going up I call it the Eastern Seaboard, right? But when I go over to Memphis, I'm outnumbered politically, right?
Not by much, though.
Not by much,
Yeah.
but I got whatever I want on this side of the state, right? So I go over there and I start talking to people that either run the airport or former deputy mayors, and I ask them, like, how do you guys survive out here? How do you have a pro-business climate? And it's the exact same thing that we do in Leadership Tennessee. They go, we both want the same thing. We want Memphis to succeed. How we get there, we may disagree on, but we also realize that if we're not sitting in the same room solving these problems, we have no chance. And I think Memphis does that better than any city.
Hands down.
It's not even close. I mentioned this to you last year. I was at a Tennessee Chamber of Commerce thing that Evan Freeman, our mutual friend, invited me to, I think just as a seat filler because he wanted me to talk to somebody else. And I go up there, and Ted, who runs the Memphis Chamber over there, I run over to him and I go, Ted, we'd met at a Leadership Tennessee event. And he said hello to me. And I said, I just want you to know that I am bringing my kids to Memphis for spring break. And his eyes got really big. I guess he wasn't used to a lot of people saying, I'm going to bring my family from Chattanooga to Memphis for spring break. Not sure if he thought I was pulling his leg or not. So I go out and I start pulling out the tickets, right? Here's where we're staying at the hotel. We're going to Graceland. We're going to the Stax Museum and all this stuff. And he goes, that's awesome. Why are you coming here? And I said, I had such an incredible experience at Leadership Tennessee, meeting people with all backgrounds over here, that I wanted to come back. I've always firmly believed that a lot of the successful people in Memphis, and this is just me being a little bit of an interesting guy, have said, don't come to Memphis, not because it isn't safe for any other reasons, because they don't want us upsetting the apple cart. They got it so awesome over there. They're like, whoa, stay out of our backyard, right? So that's...
Well, let me say this, Arch. I think that both Mayor Strickland, who's a Leadership Tennessee alum, and Mayor Paul Young,
great guy.
They understand that people will sometimes look at Memphis and think it's a place that's undesirable. What I love about Leadership Tennessee, particularly as a native, when we take people to Memphis, I always ask the question, raise your hand if you've never been here before. A lot of people raise their hand. By the time we leave, people stop and say, oh my God, this place was so great. The culture, the grit, the grind, it has so much potential.
It's real.
It's real. And, we have the best barbecue on earth, too. So it's like, I know it's some good barbecue places other across the state. But Memphis has it on lock. And I can quote our lieutenant governor, because I asked him a question about Buc-ee's one time.
Okay.
And I said, what do you think about that brisket? He said, I think that you need to go to Memphis and get some food, some barbecue, because they have the best barbecue in the state. So that's our sitting lieutenant governor right now.
He's right about that. And look, as a person that I swore off Buc-ee's before I ever went in, and it was before it was in Tennessee. And the first time I went in, I was like, oh, this is the coolest place of all time. But after about the third time you have that brisket sandwich, you're like, Jim Neely's Interstate Barbecue tastes really, really good right now, right?
Yep.
And look,
cozy corner too.
What I love about Memphis, and we didn't intend to go down a rabbit hole about Memphis, but Memphis their healthcare and the amount of people that they help in that town between Le Bonheur and between St. Jude.
And Regional One.
Oh, yeah. And nobody talks about that, right? Everybody sees the St. Jude commercials, but nobody realizes that they're scaling up. They're trying to help more people than they ever have. And there seems to have been a very concerted effort to make that the future of their car, one of the futures of their economy.
I will say this. I mean, as a person who's been raising money for St. Jude since I was in high school, it's by far my second favorite nonprofit.
Yep.
It's only second because I run Leadership Tennessee, and that's my favorite. But St. Jude is a national icon. I mean, the brand is just recognizable more than any other brand in the world. And what's interesting about St. Jude is that the amount of money that's raised comes from people who make less than $30,000 a year across the world. So they're getting big, large donors, but that's the majority of money comes from people who don't make a lot. And I think that, to your point, what I like about Memphis is that the Memphis Medical Collaborative District, you see a lot of innovation happening right there in the center of Memphis by Sun Studios.
That's right.
I mean, you see a lot of medical device innovation that's going on. A lot of people don't know that they're like actually competing with, like, out there in California, right? About the Black women in tech. They're a hub for that. So it's a lot of great things going on in Memphis. I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention that how many companies and corporations are there, from FedEx to AutoZone to Brother. I mean, it's a lot of things moving to the FedEx Forum. Like, Memphis is at a place right now that I think that Nashville was about 10 years ago.
I agree.
And we're going to see over time, with the leadership we have, with Ted Townsend at the chamber, and just all the folks who really care about Memphis. And I just have to talk about the National Civil Rights Museum.
Please.
I mean,
Russ
because
is awesome.
Russ Wigington, Dr. Wigington, is one of the best. He's a crusader of a story that no one's proud of, the fact that Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated in Memphis. It was a stain on the history of Memphis for a long time. But just, I'm so grateful that when they wanted to tear down Lorraine Motel, there were people and put a parking lot there.
Yeah.
And people stood up and said, no, we need to preserve this. And they just celebrated 35 years and I was there in the first grade when it opened. For me to be able to see where the National Civil Rights Museum is, where it started and where it is today, it's just a phenomenal thing. So I encourage people who visit Memphis to go to Graceland, to go to several places, but go to Graceland, go to Stax, but also go to the National Civil Rights Museum, because it's one of those things that I've been so many times and I pick up something new every single time that I go.
I think you said it best. Obviously, I think Stax is the coolest place in Memphis.
Oh, yeah.
But the most inspiring place in Memphis is the Lorraine Motel and the National Civil Rights Museum. And I say inspiring because I came from an easy background. I didn't have it hard. I'm a private school kid. I'll never understand what that group of folks went through well before the 60s, right? We're talking forever. And I look at Dr. King, who wasn't a large man. You see his suits hanging in the Atlanta airport, right? And you're like, was that his kid's suit? Like, 5'3" or something. How did a man that was that diminutive in stature command such a presence to get people, for lack of a better term, off their ass to try and solve problems? And they have highlighted that. And it's terrible for what it happened.
Right.
But the story that museum tells now is one of perseverance. And it's not one of rising from the ashes, because it's not like any movement died, but it is, to me, I walk out of there and I feel good about being a Tennessean, because I believe firmly that if you don't know history, you're doomed to repeat it.
Right.
And that's what Memphis has done so well, right? You've got the National Civil Rights Museum right at the bottom of the hill there. And we did a LT event at Central Barbecue right next door. But they've prioritized it as an educational learning facility as well as a tourism facility. So while Stax is cool and you can go see Isaac Hayes' Cadillac, if you want to learn what Tennessee used to be and what it has become, that's where you go. But back to what you were talking about, the Memphis Medical Collaborative District and where Nashville was, it is. you see cranes everywhere in Memphis, right? Like that makes me proud.
Me too.
I love seeing as I go across the state. Chattanooga's got them right now. Knoxville with Randy Boyd's blowing and going. Nashville is about to become the greatest super city in America. But Memphis, right? That town that we just not forgot, but was just kind of there on its own, has pulled itself up by those bootstraps. And I give Mayor Paul Young and Mayor Strickland a lot of credit. I'll never forget Mayor Young. Right after he was elected, you got him to come in and talk to us. And he, I don't want to say despondent because that wasn't it. He was learning as he went.
Right.
But what he said was, look, I had people on my side of the aisle, and, you know, these city elections are all nonpartisan, right? That harped on me because I voted in a Republican primary. So how could I be a Democrat? And he stood above that and he said, no, I'm a Memphian. Just like you and I, we're Tennesseans, right? Like, I don't really care what your background is. I care about whether you're willing to work to make this place better.
Absolutely. And I think that all goes back to the word that's on your shirt and on my sweater. It's
Proud to
leadership.
wear it.
It's leadership.
Yep.
You think about that. I mean, you asked the question about Dr. King, someone of that stature who wasn't a big, tall man, but his voice, you know, could move mountains.
That's
right. I mean, he was able to be a leader in a time when it was hard to be a leader, right?
Dangerous to be a leader. Not hard, dangerous.
Dangerous, right. And, you know, at one point he may have been one of the most dangerous men, according to the FBI.
Yeah, depending on who you want to ask.
Who you were talking to. So, like, I think that what happens is we get a chance to talk, and Dr. King is a great figure, but I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about other leaders in Tennessee. You know, from Mr. Haslam and what he did with Pilot, you know, what happened with FedEx, you know, like, I mean, it's so many leaders across this state. I worked for Lois D. Berry, who was a fantastic legislator, who was one of the first women of color to really rise up. I saw former Speaker Beth Harwell the other day, and she was talking about her time as being speaker. And she talked about how Speaker D. Berry was one of her mentors. And she really liked the way she handled things. And I think that we get to see things from a gender dynamic perspective too. Like, it wasn't easy to be a female in the 1970s and be a legislator, you know? So, like, today, I'm glad that we've come a long way as a state, but, you know, we still have a long way to go.
We certainly do.
I mean, I love the way how Governor Lee focused on, you know, rural areas. I love how he focused on distressed counties. I mean, that is so important to the vitality of this state. Like, I love Nashville. I've been here 24 years, but Nashville can't get all of the businesses that come here. I mean, Governor Haslam even said that when he was governor. It's like, look, every business can't come to Davidson and Williamson County. We have to go places. And how I look at the state is like that huge infrastructure, like that deposit that happened in West Tennessee, you know, and then we think about like how Southeast Tennessee is so different, you know, and that's tech and, you know, energy and all those things, supercomputers and all that. And you talk about
cool, by the
Knoxville. And when I mean, I think I'm a pretty smart guy, but when I'm around nuclear physicists, like, I just geek out, but I'm like, I don't know what they're talking about.
I just smile and nod. And as you said, I take copious notes and hope I remember.
Right. I mean, but that's what Tennessee is about. Like, I often describe Tennessee to people across this nation. I serve on the national board for the Association for Leadership Programs. And they're always like, tell me about Tennessee. I said, well, it's like we have 3 states inside of one. It takes 8 hours to get from Memphis to Mountain City. I said, and that's if you can bypass that traffic on 24 once you get close to Chattanooga. But I mean, people always joke on Nashville's traffic. And I say, have you ever been to Knoxville?
Look, I believe this, and I don't want to upset anybody at TDOT. Chattanooga, we're in the running for the worst in America right now. But you said it, and it made sense. I never thought about this. There was a girl from ETSU in my LT class, and she made mention when we were in Memphis, she goes, did you know it is quicker for me to go to Canada from Johnson City than it is for me to get to Memphis? And you just start going, oh, okay, but she's right. And then in between there, from Mountain City to Memphis, you go from these rural pocket communities that had no access to anything else just because they're geographically limited. So you go to the plateau where Nashville was one thing and has become one of the greatest cities in the world in my mind. And then you go over to the plains of West Tennessee and the agriculture. And then you add Memphis. It's always been that hub, not just for Tennessee, but for the Mississippi River in and of itself, right? Like, that's where you stop. It's enshrined in our state constitution, right? The three grand
Grand
divisions.
divisions.
Now, you and I would all agree that we're trying to eliminate the division part of that. There's three distinct parts of the state. And I say eliminate the divisions because we are three separate states geographically, but we're all here for the same thing. I think that what Leadership Tennessee, another thing that it does good is that it realizes that it plays a tremendous role in economic development in our state, in our future. Because look, nonprofits only matter if you've got wherewithal behind them. For-profit businesses, no matter what their mission is, doesn't matter if they don't have profits. And I personally say I have never seen a substantial diaspora of people get angry if they didn't have to worry about their bills, right?
Right.
Economic stability and workforce development, to me, are the two greatest things in our state. I think that's our future. But I learned that in Leadership Tennessee because we talked to people in Memphis. We talked to people in Paris Landing that, probably more agricultural. You talk to folks in Chattanooga. But then you start looking at Northeast Tennessee, right? And we talk about partnerships. And that's something that I think Leadership Tennessee has done better than anybody, bar none. Because Alfred will say this, when you're Leadership Tennessee or you're a nonprofit and you go into one of these communities that doesn't know you, it's hard sometimes, right?
Right.
So unless you have built relationships either with municipal government or somebody that you know up there, it's hard to get in the front door, right?
I'll say this, though. Our reputation precedes us.
It does.
So, I mean, it may be harder for some other organizations, but like when they look at our roster of people who've gone through, like you mentioned David Golden before,
yeah.
He's my former board chair.
That's right.
I absolutely love David Golden. I learned so much from him, and he was so supportive of me as CEO. He'd always say, "Hey, Alfred, you're the CEO. I want you to lead this organization. That's why we hired you.
Yep.
Like, what's your vision?" And I'd always say, thank you for that, because oftentimes you get so busy planning things across the state, making sure the staff has what they need. Logistics are always tough across the state. Weeks ago, we had this huge snowpocalypse in Nashville.
That's right.
So how do we respond to that in the face of us potentially, counseling what a session will look like in the city? So those logistics are always very important. But one thing I'll say about Tri-Cities in particular is that when I show up to Johnson City, Bristol, or Kingsport, all of our graduates come out and support. And they have on their badge with like a badge of honor, because there are probably 95 leadership programs in every county.
Oh, absolutely.
But we're the pinnacle organization statewide. We're the premier community leadership program in the state. And our founders talked about how it was designed to be a graduate program for the other ones that happen here. And because we have access to these top leaders, it's always things that spark on how you can do things. Like, I'm always sitting back in the room like, I would love to raise my hand and contribute, but I can't because I'm not a class participant.
That's right.
But I'm always taking notes about things. I'm able to identify what's working in different places and think, what? How can I connect the dots for one of our members who's doing something in this space so they can come here and do it, and be successful and improve our metrics? Because that's what it's all about.
That's right.
Like, these leadership programs are so valuable. And this is probably a good time to talk about Senator Alexander.
Please.
What he said. I mean, by far, his presentation to one of our signature program classes, maybe it was class 11, he was the closing plenary speaker. And he was introduced by the president of Maryville College because he cares about, and when I tell you that he talked about, it just dawned on me. He said, 50 years ago when I was governor, I was like, wow.
Whoa.
So that's how he started. He said, when I was governor 50 years ago, he said, there weren't a lot of leadership programs. He said, when I was looking at other states that were successful, who were doing things better than Tennessee, I noticed that those states had leadership programs throughout the state. And he said, my wife helped found Leadership Nashville. And they also helped found other leadership programs across the nation. Well, not found them, but like advised them on how to do it. And it was so unique to hear that perspective, because he said the work that Leadership Tennessee is doing is so valuable. The same thing with Mr. Jim Hazen, Big Jim Hazen. He said the same thing. He said, Alfred, the work that Leadership Tennessee is doing is so valuable. He said, when we created Leadership Knoxville, we reached out to Nelson Andrews out of Nashville and said, how can we create this in Knoxville? And so you see the common thread. So like all these programs, Leadership Memphis, Knoxville, Chattanooga, they're older than Leadership Tennessee.
That's true.
They're much older, but their programs aren't designed to do the same thing we do. They're designed to really go a mile deep.
That's right.
On issues. See, we can go a mile wide on issues across the state, and we just give you an appetizer. We're not trying to give you the full meal. We want you to come back to Memphis. We want you to come back to Chattanooga, Knoxville, Tri-Cities, Nashville. We want to show you some things, introduce you to some people so you can say, I want to solve this problem and come back.
It's the expectation that if we give you a taste, you're going to want to go make a difference, right?
And that's because we believe in this state.
That's right. And you said it, Leadership Chattanooga, Leadership Knoxville, Nashville, all of they're great programs, but you can't show up to Leadership Tennessee and not do the work. I think that is holding people accountable in the class. And it's not, Alfred's not standing there with a ruler saying, if you don't do this, it doesn't work. You have people in that class that you know you are an equal with, and you want them to see you working as hard as they are to try and solve those problems. Because as you said, this state's 7.4 million people, but there's 1,000 people that run it, and 850 of them are Leadership Tennessee grads.
Right.
So if I'm not working, if I'm not with those people that are, even if we're on equal footing, they know more about something than I do. If I'm not hustling, trying to keep up with them, then I'm letting them down.
Right.
And I don't want them to think that I don't believe in my state as much as they do. And that's like, you got to keep people honest, right? And that's why I love it.
And I'll add this too. Like this is a interesting perspective about like how these leadership programs are great. I talked to an LT Next alum recently, and she texted me and said, it's 4 people from my class who are actively running for office right now.
They run for the same race?
Different races.
Okay, thank goodness.
Look, across the state. In all 4 of them, according to her, she said that they decided to run for office because of what they saw in Leadership Tennessee.
100%.
And that's because a lot of times we're in our own little bubble, and what's important to you, you really don't care about other things outside of your bubble because it doesn't matter to you. But then when you get that broad perspective, people will say, wow, I want to do more. And that's kind of really what happened to me. I had a great job at Vanderbilt. I loved my job. I was associate vice chancellor. I did all community relations, all local government relations, town gown issues, community partnerships. I never would have thought in a million years that I would leave that job. And when I saw the job posting, I was like, not interested. Not really. I would like it, but maybe when I get to my 60s, that'd be a way for me to really, give back when I'm in my 60s. And then when I decided to apply for it, I was like, this is the job I want to do. Like, I love traveling the state. I love going to Fort Campbell and shooting machine guns and rappelling and learning from the commanding general about the impact of Clarksville and Montgomery County and how people come to the area because of the military, and they don't go to Kentucky. Some of them do. They move to Tennessee.
That's right. That's right.
Right. And it's nothing against Kentucky. Kentucky's a great state, but the majority, the lion's share of the veterans stay in Tennessee. And it's several reasons. You just mentioned earlier, Clarksville is like, we have the Clarksville County mayor who's gone through our program. We have the trustee who's gone through our program. We have the general from Austin P State University.
Right now.
I mean, we have a new state representative who just graduated from our LT Next program in the last year or two. I mean, like, they're really on the move. And like, I love to see that. I would not know anything about Clarksville or Fort Campbell or the 101st Airborne without going through the program and really trying to learn about what they're doing there. And guess what? All those people are Rotarians.
That's right. I will say this, and I learned it from LT, from a girl, again, that I mentioned that was at ETSU in my class, but I also had help from another guy that was in my class that works for Tennessee Achieves. For years and years and years, I was in insurance sales, right? The only thing that you need to be in insurance sales is a license from the state. I didn't have a college degree. I spent 10 years at UTC partying and playing golf. And I had sold and developed agents for years by saying, you don't want to go to college, just show me you can sell. You make a ton of money and you don't ever need that. And then I'm talking to these people in this class, and I see how much education matters to these pocket communities in Northeast Tennessee. And my argument for you don't need this anymore, man, I got shot to pieces, just absolutely shot. And at that point I realized, like, okay, I need to hold myself accountable because this class is holding me accountable. And I got young kids like you. So I called my friend Ben Sterling from Tennessee Achieves and I was like, boss, I had a problem. I've never needed a job before. I've always just created my own. And now I've got these young kids and I don't want them to get through high school and then be like, why didn't daddy graduate college? And me have to come back and say, well, I didn't need to go to college. That flew all over my handle. So like one of the hardest, most uncomfortable things, right? Is like I sent Ben my transcript and oh man, like there was the classes that I attended, great GPA. The problem is there were more classes that I didn't attend than classes that I did attend. And he didn't judge me, or at least out in public, for that. And that's why I love him.
Ben's the man.
Ben's the man. And he calls me and goes, dude, this is what we're here for. Let me try and help you. And he walked me through some things. And by the time we had gotten done, and I'm walking out of the Tennessee Tower after our plenary session at LT Next, I'm walking down the hill with this lady and I looked right at her and I said, you may believe this or may not, but what you said to me about education is the reason that I'm going back to school, because I want to be able to tell my kids that you are never too old to finish something that you started. So while Leadership Tennessee showed me that I needed something else to do with my life, it showed me how to be a better family man in a way that I was never, ever, ever expecting. And it's because I hopefully paid attention enough to realize that education is the future, not for me, not for you, but it's the future for everybody, right? Like that, I think if there's one lesson that I can learn other than being able to solve hard problems with people that don't look like me is that you're never too old to quit learning.
I love that. I'm glad that we captured this, because one thing that we don't do the best job of as an organization is capture stories, success stories that only happen because of Leadership Tennessee. And it's something, this is a great example, and I'm happy to hear it. We have other examples of, like when COVID happened, we had the person who ran the COVID response for the city of Nashville, Dr. Jahangir. He's a dear friend and a Leadership Tennessee alum. He was also in the class with the director of the health department for the state, the commissioner of health.
Yeah.
So Nashville didn't have some of the same issues. He will always say, I was able to pick up the phone and call the commissioner of health and say, hey, we're trying to do this in Nashville. And because they knew each other through Leadership Tennessee, things move like
synergy, right?
Synergy. And that's what it's about. It's about, like, I don't want us to look like an elitist organization, but I understand that there are elite people who've gone through the program, but I don't think that
it doesn't make them elitist.
Right.
Being at the top of your class doesn't make you elitist. It just means that you're a competent operator. And you and I, in our background, know that competent operators are what make the world go round, right?
And my background is in strategy.
That's right.
Connecting the dots. Like I was so shocked to receive the Nashville Business Journal Connector Award, like Power 100. I was like, somebody texted me, congratulations for making the NBJ Power 100. I'm like, what category? Connector. I was like, well, you know what? I like that because
can you send me the link?
I've always been the type of person who likes to connect the dots. If you tell me you're working on something and I know somebody who needs help with something, I'm gonna be like, you know what? You two need to meet. And that's what I think that really goes back to the question you asked earlier. What makes me qualified to lead an organization like this? I know how to be completely nonpartisan and not take sides on things, but I know how to keep the conversation going. That doesn't mean I agree with something. That just means, does anybody want to respond to something that Art just said? Are you in agreement or do you disagree? How can we take this conversation a little bit further? Can somebody add something that helps the whole? You know, those types of things as a facilitator, that's when you walk out and people fill out those survey responses and say, hey, I really enjoyed this because my life was changed, or I think differently about something. And the last thing I'll say is this. Oftentimes I explain that people look at me and say, oh, you have this easy job. All you do is convene. It's not that easy. Like, I mean, because when you're dealing with personalities,
850 of the biggest personalities,
right, you know, people who are not used to being told no. I mean, like that's something to be, to be studied, because like when you stand in front of a group of a new class, no matter which program, they're all looking at you at opening retreat like, oh my God, here's a leader, the president and CEO of Leadership Tennessee. I'm about to learn about leadership. And I have to remind them, no, you're already a leader. Like, I'm looking around the room saying, everybody in this room is a bigger leader than I am. They've led much bigger budgets. They've led larger staffs. They've done a lot of things. And I have too, but like, these are like top level folks. And I'm sitting there like, am I qualified to really lead this? And then I step back and say, yes, I am, because I may not be able to teach you how to be a nuclear physicist, but I can. Like, we had one person, I love her to death. She helped find an element on the periodic table.
Oh, wow.
And she works at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. So like, when I'm talking to her, I'm like, okay, I know, like, I mean, Mina.
Mina
of
has forgotten more about things than I will ever learn in my life.
I mean, I love talking to her. I'm like, I know she's dumbing it down for me so I can understand.
Yeah. You're like, you're grateful that she's on the other end explaining it.
But we can pick out so many people, across the state who are brilliant like that in their own industries. And like, the thing is, you might be great at construction, but what about education? And how can we connect the dots there? Because it could be some pathways, that doesn't require you to have a bachelor's degree to get into construction, right? Like, what are we doing to make sure that lives are improved? And that's the beautiful part of this job, is because you get to see things like, and I always say, like, look under the hood, but also the other analogy is we have to get away from looking in the rearview mirror. And saying what we done in the past. No, let's look over the hood. Mm-hmm. Like, what are we going to do?
Get ahead of them. Yes. The saying in business is you got to outrun the hole, right?
Yep,
and
absolutely.
If you're looking back, and in politics, if you're explaining, you're losing.
Right.
But I think you hit on a lot of good things about whether I'm qualified to be here. I think that you are possibly the greatest networker I know. Like, you are just truly amazing, but you're a good leader because you realize that leadership isn't necessarily leading from the front. It's realizing that people around you are better at leading certain things than you are, and you let them pick up the football and run with it. You empower them to do better. We're all here to do that, right? Just make Tennessee a better place. That's it. And I think that's the goal for Leadership Tennessee. And I think that's what you do so well is, I may not have the answers to everything, but somebody in this room does, and we're going to find out who it is by just pulling at that loose thread.
Right.
Every time you pull at that loose thread, you find something else out, right?
Well, thank you for that.
It was one of the greatest experiences that I've had. My hope is that, well, I know you're going to continue to do it, hopefully well into your 60s. This isn't a 60s job. You need to be a young man to do it, but I believe you have the energy.
Well, all of my peers tell me I'm crazy for doing it at this age. A lot of people have stopped other careers, and then they say, well, I'm going to ride this off into retirement.
And ain't you, though.
Nope.
That's never.
Nope.
In my time of knowing Alfred, sitting on his laurels has never been one of those things. For a while there, Alfred and I would run into each other, never in the cities that we resided in, but in other places. And it's a small circle that I'm grateful to be at least a small part of.
And I want to be like you and travel to 95 counties again.
I will say this. From a waistline perspective, it was detrimental to my long-term health because I have no self-control. And I'm like you. Every time I'm going into one of these counties, somebody's like, well, you need to see so-and-so.
Right.
And so-and-so has the best coffee shop or the best barbecue or best something. And I'm too polite to say no. So I'm going to go sit there and do this. And after the 95 counties, I think I put on pants with a belt 4 times in 6 months because I'm like, midlife crisis. And I'm showing my kids the state. Alfred, when I came back home and I had to put on a belt, I mean, like it's
different.
It was like wearing Lululemon yoga pants. It caused a lot of consternation. My wife's like, we can't afford to buy new clothes. You're going to have to get on a treadmill. But it was because Leadership Tennessee showed me a different perspective. It allowed me to see what I believe our state is and what it can become. And that's, again, one of the most enjoyable and one of the most educational experiences of my life. Now, I got to ask you something, and this matters to me. This is my hook question. And you can take this one of two ways, because look, you are a Nashville guy and you have been for 24 years, but you are also a Memphian who I would like to be a non-native Memphian one day. Tell me what you miss, either out of Nashville, out of Memphis, or out of Tennessee, and can you bring it back? Is it responsible to? What is it?
I think people are more transparent and direct in Memphis than you get other places.
Yes.
And I love that. And I think that, kind of one of my things I say a lot about Nashville, people say, oh, you've been here 24 years. You're basically Nashvilleian. I said, that is true for everybody in the state unless you're from Memphis.
That's right.
It's hard to, people will always say, no, you're from Memphis. You'll never be a Nashvilleian. And I wear it with a badge of pride as well. Like I'm a Memphian, born and raised. I'm really a West Tennessean.
Yeah.
My mom's from Tipton County.
Okay.
And we have 250 acres in Tipton County to this day, air property that we still have and take care of. And my dad's family is from Fayette County.
Okay.
And so I'm a true West Tennessee native son. Now, of course, my dad's family moved to Memphis. So my parents met later, but I was always born in Memphis. But I would spend all of my weekends and in Tipton County. I mean, it's just a great place. I love to be around the farm animals. I never wanted to be a farmer, but I love to see the bulls and the cows, the chickens, the roosters. I always had a affinity for roosters because they just always move around the farm and kind of follow you and run away. That was always something that I wanted to just do. And I also love the fact that just agriculture is so interesting in this state. I mean, our top commodities is soybean, corn, other things like that, cotton in certain parts of the state. But like we had pear trees, apple trees, peach trees, like my grandfather and my great uncles, they grew all their food. And that's just something that's so cool to me because I don't have a green thumb at all. But I do like to eat fresh vegetables. I don't like to eat a lot out of cans, or out of frozen bags. But like, I really miss that piece, just being able to go outside and say, I want that apple and get it.
That's what I love the state, because you and I've sat here forever and we've talked about like the future and AI and like all this really cool stuff, but we forget that the Tennessee State Seal says what? Agriculture and then commerce, right?
Absolutely.
We are still an ag first state. So you say that as a guy that's a Memphian and me that's an East Tennessean, and like I want Chattanooga to be the Dynamo of Dixie in a different way, right? Like we were the industrial capital of the state, the mill capital of the state, the foundry capital of a nasty town.
Right.
Well, that's all gone now. So I want to talk about the new jobs that come in, but those new jobs in a large part of this state are still that ag, right? But that ag's changing a little bit too. It's so nice to hear that. Y'all, I want to say thanks to one of my closest friends, Dr. Alfred Degrafinreid.
Thank you for having me.
He does more hard work in this state, helping people that he will never even know than anybody that I've ever met. I'm grateful to call him a Nashvilleian. I'm grateful to call him a mentor, and I can't wait to see where the world takes you, my friend.
Well, I appreciate you, brother. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, sir. So we talk a lot in the business world about being the best in your class. And you can always say, I'm better than everyone else in my market. And maybe you are. Maybe you're the best insurance salesman, or you're the best chef in Chattanooga, or maybe you're the best tiddlywink maker in Nashville. But guess what? You're not the best in the state. And then if you want to be the best, you have to go find the best. And you have to spend time with people that are better than you. Being the smartest person in the room does you absolutely no good. You have to continue to find people that will push you. That's what Leadership Tennessee does. They put people in situations that would normally make them uncomfortable and show them how to strive for greatness. I know that I became a stronger leader after I got out of Leadership Tennessee. And a lot of that had to do with me being called out on my bullshit. I had always told people and sold for years and years that salesmen don't need a college degree, and I didn't have one. By the end of my Leadership Tennessee NXT, there was an incredible lady from ETSU that had blown holes in my arguments to the point where I had to stand up and say, ma'am, I got no more legs to stand on. I'm going back to school to finish what I didn't finish, to show my kids that I'm never too old to finish what I started. That's because she was stronger than me. My ideas were only as good as I made them seem in my head. Once you get out and you start talking to people, a lot of the illusions you have about how you've created your character will fall away. And that only happens with a diverse background. If you want to solve problems in our great state, you are going to have to do it with people with different backgrounds than you. If you believe that your ideas are the best ideas, let me go ahead and tell you that they're not. Somebody is going to find fault with them. And if you're only looking at change through one side of the lens, then that's all the change that you're ever going to get. We're not here to help 20% of the electorate. We're here to help 100% of the electorate. And what I want us all to realize is if we continually make small adjustments. If we pass one bill that helps 80% of the population, guess what? That's a substantially smaller amount of people that we have to find a bill to fix next. If you continually work on these problems will continually become smaller. And guess what? That doesn't mean problems go away. It means we're just more prepared to handle the next hard thing that comes in front of us. Remember this, 8 miles in, 8 miles out. Hard work is undefeated.